Everyone, it's Michael, and it's time for the March 2020 Orchid Collection Update. Wow, who knew that in between last year's Orchid Collection Update and now there would be a gigantic global pandemic? I don't even really have the words to begin to address this, but I just want to start this video off by saying if your health has been impacted by this pandemic, if your employment has been impacted by this pandemic, my thoughts, my prayers, all of my positivity are with you. I am sending all of the best vibes. This is such uncharted territory for us globally, us as Americans, us as human beings. This is a really interesting and challenging time. I will say that there is one silver lining to this entire thing, which is I have seen people showing up for each other in much more significant ways than I've ever seen in my life. You know, people really going out of their way to ensure that the elderly are provided for and cared for, that their neighbors have the appropriate resources. So if there is one thing that we can really extract and mobilize from this horrible, horrible crisis, I hope it's to be good to one another. And that's all I'm gonna say about that. I really, again, there are no words to speak adequately about this pandemic, but just know that I love all of you and I hope that you're all doing very well. Having said that, it almost seems so inconsequential to even talk about the plants, but that's what we're here to do, so let's talk about the plants. My orchids are doing phenomenally well this month. It's interesting, it's almost as if they're aware that there's something going on outdoors and they really wanted to put on a show. And I am greeting that as a source of joy with open arms. Things are happening in a really beautiful way for a lot of my plants. In regard to what I'm doing this month, I'm doing the exact same thing I was doing last month. I am continuing to flush all of my orchid containers once to twice a month. I am using tap water because I have very soft tap water here in San Francisco. But then I am filling the water reservoir in between those flushes with dilute nutrient solution. And I am continuing to mist the plants every single morning while sustaining about 40% ambient humidity with my humidifier. So having said all of that, let's just go ahead and jump in and look at the plants that have something new, different, and interesting happening this month. Jumping in with number one in the collection, we have my NoID mini Phalaenopsis. Now I keep showing this one because I just think it's so interesting how it's developing. It has new leaves on the way, it has tons and tons of new roots. It does have that basal keiki that's continuing to develop. I just think it's pretty remarkable. I do think that I want to repot this one because the mineral buildup from when I originally potted it is still very pronounced and isn't resolving. But I also am kind of curious to see how it progresses on its own because as it establishes this gorgeous aerial root system and continues to develop roots inside of the container, I think it's kind of self-regulating. So I'm always grappling with if it's not broken, don't fix it. I do know that that mineral buildup is not ideal, but it does seem to be finding a way to navigate around it on its own. So I'm gonna think a little bit more about this one, but we'll figure out what happens a little later. Now we're gonna jump to number three in the collection. This is my Wilsonara Aloha Sparks, and just look at this beauty. Last month it just began to peek out a flower spike, and now the flower spike is about 2 feet tall. It's really remarkable how quickly this has developed. Again, this one was divided really poorly. I will link that video below. But when I got it repotted after its division died, the second half of the division, it established really, really well once I added a top layer of sphagnum moss. And you can see it has really just filled the container super quickly, established a beautiful new growth, new pseudobulb, and a beautiful new flower spike. So I'm very excited to see how this progresses. Now my excitement for this one is big, but not nearly as big as it is for number 11, which is my Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos. I've had this plant for almost 3 years now, and just look at this flower spike. You guys, I think that we are just days away from this opening its bloom. Look how gorgeous the flower bud is. It's almost leopard print. So stunning, so gorgeous. I'm just so pleased that it's come this far because this is a sequential bloomer. It will continue to produce blooms off of the same spike for years and years. So I'm absolutely thrilled. I can't wait to see this one in bloom. So interesting. Now over this way we have number 12. This is my Phalaenopsis Oxlottery Prince. I've showed you this one a couple times before because it's been in bloom for a while. Now it's interesting, I wasn't going to do a bloom profile video on this one, and then I changed my mind, and then it appears to be too late because the blooms are just now starting to drop. And the reason I wasn't going to do a bloom profile on it was I was thinking, okay, it's a Phalaenopsis orchid. I know that I love them, but how exciting can it be for others? But it occurred to me that the bloom profile isn't just about showcasing blooms. It really is about kind of dissecting the narrative of how this plant bloomed, because this was one of the earlier orchids in my collection. This one endured a lot of mistreatment to get to this point. So I think that the concept of the bloom profile is, the video concept is evolving a bit for me, because now it's not just about showing you the blooms and talking about the temperament of the plant. It's about really dissecting the narrative of what happened, of how I got the plant to get to where it is. The mistakes, the trials, the tribulations, the successes, just because I think sharing that kind of information can be very beneficial for people who are exploring different tactics and growing methods. So that's a big sidebar, but I do think I'm going to start doing bloom profiles for all of the orchids in the collection, whether or not people would think of them as common. Moving on, we're gonna go to number 13 in the collection. This is my NoID Fragment PDM. And this one struggled for a really long time, and now it is just doing amazing. Look at how beautiful and robust these are. It has new leaf growths coming in on both of the fans. And also, just look at this root system. It has really just, for the first time, taken over, really acclimated to semi-hydroponics. I do think that that top layer of sphagnum moss was integral for that to happen. I do think that patience was integral for it to happen, but it does seem like the biggest contributing factor to this one's shift is the light levels from being in the artificial lighting enclosure. It has just really responded positively to that. So that's number 13. So shooting this one a bit out of sequence, this is number 16 in the collection. This is my Deborah, Dodson, Kalasa, Tavarezcata. And you know what? She is ready to come out of dormancy. It's so interesting because I forced this one into dormancy. It has not been watered in months. I also did a preventative treatment for spider mites. My Catasetum types just struggle with periodic spider mite infestations. So this year I got ahead of the curve. I did a bit of an experimental treatment on it, and I'll keep you posted if I find that it was super effective. But just look at this one. It is ready to come out of dormancy. Now the reason I haven't gotten it repotted, I mean, look, even there. The reason I haven't got it repotted yet is because I'm not quite sure what I want to do with it. This is already such a gigantic plant, and I think it needs to be divided. This is just, it's too much to manage. But I also don't know that I want to have more orchids to care for at this time because I'm already struggling with the ones that I have. So we'll see what I do with this. I'm not quite sure yet. It doesn't look like it's quite ready to have water again, but it's getting there quickly, so I need to make a decision. Now we're gonna jump to number 18 in the collection. This is my Zico peplum. And this one, it doesn't have a flower spike. It doesn't have anything really interesting going on, except for right down here at the base. Look at the directionality of these roots. Now, I'm sure a lot of the very seasoned orchid growers who are watching this are kind of like, well, of course, Michael, that's just how they grow. But I do think that there's something to be said about how sentient and how aware these plants are, because the source of moisture in this container is obviously coming from the sphagnum moss. And look how precisely the orchids are growing into the sphagnum moss. They know precisely where it is. I just think it's really remarkable how aware these plants are. And it really reframes how you interact with them when you know that they are pretty self-sustaining. They are capable of, what's the word I'm looking for? They're very capable of implementing the changes that they need to support themselves, so long as you're a good partner and you really give them just those minor tweaks that they need. So that's kind of how I'm approaching my orchids at this point in time. Now we're gonna jump to number 22 in the collection. This is my maxillary atenafolia. And what I really want to highlight here is look how old and desiccated this root system is. This one really is not putting out new roots. It has not put out new roots in a very long time, independent of the ones that are happening above the potting medium. So you can see a lot of these little new growths are putting out aerial roots. So I do think that one of the things I'm going to explore next is dividing this plant and planting the ones that have these aerial roots in some sphagnum moss. I've been flirting with this concept for a long time as an orchid grower, but the reality that I'm discovering is, yes, most plants can grow in semi-hydroponics, but just because it can grow in semi-hydro does not mean it should be grown in semi-hydro. So at some point when this was growing in Colorado, it did seem to enjoy the semi-hydroponic setup, but now it does not. So I'm gonna explore some other growing methods and see how it responds, because this plant hasn't bloomed for me. This hasn't done much for me. And even with the addition of the high light levels from the LED grow light, it really hasn't created any noteworthy changes. So I do think that a change of medium is required. Now we're gonna move on to number 25 in the collection. This is my Epidendrum Green Hornet. This is one of my more regular bloomers. You can check out its bloom profile. But this one has been doing really well. It put down a beautiful new root system. It has new growths coming in here as well as over here. You can see the flower spike peeking through the sheath right there. And I don't know if you can even tell, but there is a second flower spike on the way through this sheath here. So this one has really responded positively to the addition of the LED grow light. It really has a lot of forward momentum. I'm so excited to see this one in bloom again. Now, a slightly less positive story. We are back to number 26. This is my Allosaurus stellar. And this one just has not done well for a very long time. I did finally repot it. I got rid of all of the dead pseudobulbs. And what I did is I just put a little layer of leca at the bottom and then sphagnum moss on top to really encourage new root growth. And only time will tell. I'm so surprised that this is still clinging to life, to be honest with you. And I'm hoping that this creates some more momentum for it, but I'm just not sure what will happen from here. Now moving on to number 29. This is one in the collection that I don't show very often because not a lot has been happening with it. This is my Eulaphia petersi. I am absolutely enamored with this plant. Its flower spikes are insane and so beautiful, but I've never gotten it to bloom, and I'm not actually even sure that you will be able to get it to bloom indoors, but God knows I'm gonna give it the old college try. I think this is a very similar narrative to my maxillary atenafolia. Just because it can grow in semi-hydro does not mean it should. This is a desert-dwelling orchid. It wants sandy medium. It wants super fine bark. So I think I might just convert it to its classic medium and see if that makes any impact. But you can see it's right about the time to do it because they're just started a brand new growth at the base here. And this has been dormant for almost 4 months. So it is time to give it a fresh start and a new approach to life. Also being shot out of sequence is number 36 in the collection. This is my Fred Clarkiara After Dark SVO Black Pearl, who is also just beginning to come out of dormancy. And similar to number 16 in the collection, this one got a bit of an experimental treatment with the spider mites just to make sure that they don't come back. So I'm gonna keep a close eye on this one. I will keep it quarantined as well because I'm just not quite sure how it will behave yet. And we will see what happens, but I do really wanna see this one in bloom. Each time it has created flower spikes for me, I was busy trying to treat the spider mites, which always made the flower spikes abort, but I'm hoping this year will be a different story. Now we're gonna jump to number 39 in the collection, ongoing bane of my existence. This is my Zygonesia cynosure. And it's so funny because I was talking kind of disparagingly about this plant during the last video, and then it threw out a flower spike, and I was like, oh, how lovely, maybe I misjudged our relationship, this plant really loves me. And then as it was developing, I don't know if you can tell, one of the flower buds has already rotted. It's so, we just don't get along. So I think what I'm gonna do with this one, when our office reopens, I am going to bring this into work and try to cultivate it in that environment because it's just, it just doesn't like me. It doesn't like being here. So I wanna give it another chance at life. Now we're gonna jump to number 46 in the collection, my Oncidium Twinkle White Pink. Now look how beautifully this one is doing. I'm so excited. Look at this flower spike. It has been developing for months and months, which people warned me about. These do take a very long time for the flower spikes to develop. It gave me a second flower spike off of that same lovely pseudobulb. And look what's coming through right here. A third flower spike on another new pseudobulb. So this one is gonna give me quite a display. I am so excited to see this in bloom. And given how staggered these flower spikes came out, I do think that this will be in bloom for quite some time. So I'll get to enjoy its lovely, delicate little blooms for months to come. Now we're gonna jump to number 51 in the collection, which is actually all 4 of these Phalaenopsis. These are all from my wedding with Justin. I kept all of these, I repotted them. I used to have 5, I just gave one to a friend. And it's so funny because I got a text from my friend saying, did you know that that flower was in spike? And I didn't realize it was when I gave it to her. So I decided, okay, well, I know that these tend to sync up when they do anything, so let me just take a look. And look, not just 1, not just 2, not just 3, but all 4 have flower spikes coming in at the exact same time. And even the 5th one that I gave away as a gift has a flower spike coming in. It's just really wonderful because, again, after years of experimentation and years of giving these insufficient light levels, it's nice to know that when you implement the change that you just see the results. So super pleased to see all of these in spike. Jumping back in with number 52 in the collection, this is my Renanthera Calsum Red Dragon, and this one remains incredibly uncertain, but also incredibly fascinating. It is the only Vandaceous type orchid that I have left growing in Semi-Hydroponics because it just continues to be okay. I mean, it's not doing phenomenally because it's not blooming for me. It hasn't done anything like that, but it's continuing to produce these gorgeous aerial roots. You can see that the new leaf growth has exceeded all of its previous growths, and it just continues to churn out leaves. So I'm just not quite sure what's happening with this one. It is much more experimental than a lot of my other potting methodologies, but I'm just gonna keep watching it and see what happens because it doesn't seem to be disturbed by its grow method. So we'll see. Now moving on to number 54, this is my Epilelio Cattleya Volcano Prince. And this one just finished blooming for me, and it's so interesting. Almost as soon as it dropped its last bloom, it just pooped out tons of new growth. Look how this new growth came in super quickly. You've got another one coming in right here by my finger. You have, I don't know if you can even see it in the dead center, there's another one. On the opposite side, you have another little one coming in. It just has intense momentum. Now, I did say when I did the bloom profile on this one that I think it could bloom twice a year. There was some pushback on that, and I'm so curious to see what will happen because I find it hard to believe that none of these new growths would create a bloom, but we'll see. I don't know. I'm super curious to see if it actually can do twice a year. Now we're going to jump from number 54 to number 58 in the collection. This is my Anthes Makram X Self. Now I repotted this one, and it's interesting because it's been much more challenging for me to care for since I repotted it. I did size it up just slightly, but the issue is not the size, the issue is the aeration of the medium. Because this one really does prefer a damp medium. Before I had it in a plastic container, so there was no airflow through the entire container. You know, the moss stayed damp. But now that it is in this growing method, it dries out much faster. So fast, in fact, that the other new growth dried up because I forgot to water it for a couple of days. Now, if I take you in, you can see that there is another new growth peeking its head through now. So it is getting better, but I just don't know if this is a great grow method for this plant. I don't know if it's the best grow method for me because I don't know that I'll be attentive enough to keep it moist enough. So I'm gonna keep my eyes on this. The only reason I opted for this kind of a basket culture is because sometimes the flower spikes will grow down into the medium and then get stuck at the bottom if it's not in a slatted or open container. But now I'm wondering if I can just, I don't know, I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I do feel like this needs, it needs a barrier from the elements just slightly so it can retain moisture a little bit more effectively, or at least it needs it in my grow environment and the way that I care for it. So that's number 58. Now we're gonna move on to number 59. There's not much to report here, but unlike my other two catasetum type orchids, my Cloesia Rebecca Northern is just not doing anything. It has not given me a new growth. It went into dormancy, it dropped all of its leaves, and it's been like this ever since. So I'm just hoping that it comes back at some point. Nothing appears to be rotting. I mean, the bulbs on it still look very robust and green and healthy. Maybe it's just gonna be a late bloomer, no pun intended, but it does seem odd that it hasn't come back yet. Now we're gonna jump to number 60 in the collection. This is my Volara Peggy Ruth Carpenter, and look at this beauty. Could she be any more gorgeous? Just an absolutely stunning bloom. Now it did produce this one flower spike with just one bud, but then on this side you have the flower spike it produced with 5 buds. So I am gonna do a bloom profile video on this one shortly, but I wanna make sure that it has a more robust bloom to show than just one. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Now we're gonna jump from number 60 to number 61 in the collection. This is my Poti nara Miki Kobayashi D, and this one quite literally unpotted itself. I was in the living room and I heard a dull thud in the guest room. I got up and this one had, again, literally unpotted itself. And you can see how that happened. The old root system has completely, I mean, look at this. The old root system has completely desiccated. It's totally dry. It is putting out a series of beautiful new roots, right up the top, but those are not enough to anchor the plant to the medium. This grows in such a unruly manner that I just don't know how I'm gonna repot it. I think I don't want to divide it, but I think I have to divide it. So I'm still making some decisions here, and in the meantime, it's just hanging out on this paper towel, but we'll see what becomes of this one. And then on to the last one I'll show today, which is number 65 in the collection. This is my Sergio Lara Yokosuka story. It bloomed and just, wow. Look how beautiful these blooms are. You know, especially in times of crisis, especially in times of struggle, these simple things of beauty make all the difference in my spirit. And when I woke up and saw this one in bloom, my heart really just swelled. I felt, I don't know, it just gave me a little bit more strength for the day. I know it sounds so silly and I'm getting kind of emotional, but orchids really do have the capacity to bring us to places of peace that were previously unknown to us. And I am counting my blessings right now for all of the wonderful things that exist in my life. I'm counting my blessings for my health. I'm counting my blessings for my husband. And I'm counting my blessings that even though I'm home, I still have the opportunity to be gainfully employed and to work from home. I'm grateful to enjoy the beauty of these plants. I'm so grateful. It seems like they're blooming with extra intensity because I'm home to see them. Maybe I'm just a big softie, maybe I'm just sensitive, but I do think it is really beautiful. So with that being said, I wish you all so much health and so much happiness. Stay safe, stay well. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with me. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. As always, be sure to help one another in the comment section because I'm so seldom available to do so. Don't forget to click subscribe and have a beautiful rest of your day. I love you guys so much. Bye.